Good morning, friends. My name is Reverend Juniper Meadows. I use she, her pronouns. I'm tall, curly-haired woman with green hair. I committed to the green, y'all. Just get into it. With black clergy robes and a stole with a Luna moth on it, and it is my pleasure to serve as your settled minister here at Second Unitarian Church of Omaha. Today, among other things, is Imbolc or Imbolc. We'll get into more of what that means, sort of the anticipation of spring. And I have a poem that I wrote this time for the occasion titled Mother Winter. I invite you to enter into a space of open-heartedness, open-mindedness to hear this poem, and to prepare yourself for the spring just around the corner. What wrath hath time worn? Hard into the soul, ice-hanging fingers, nails of mountain stone, unbearably alone. That gray sky, cold air, hair of frost and lost to despair. Who would not crash in rage at the sense of one more fair? Bride of gold remains a time untold, forgotten and forgetting, for does every season not bleed into the next? Is the circle not unbroken? Do we yet still fall around a sacred fire? Care becomes you, Mother Winter. Gaelic old and splintered. Now comes a time of loosened knots, falling tresses. Come and let the children play. It will never be safe enough to let the flowers rise. Delicate and real, yet feel and be they must, as dust will fly and shoots arise for perfect love and perfect trust. Imbolc or Imbolc is a traditionally Gaelic holiday centering the earliest stirrings of the coming spring. It is not spring yet. Maybe you don't need to be told that. There is an anticipatory quality of this time, though, reflected in the world around us. The coldest days may be yet to come. Yet such a time calls a seeker to consider the roots stirring, the wheels whirring, the world turning back round again. Only a simple faith is required here, that the dawn will break, the sun will rise tomorrow, flowers will bloom again. A simple and sustaining faith, emblematic of the one our own times call for. We must remember, for all the struggles still to come, for all that love would call us to do, this too shall pass. Imbolc literally translates to in the belly. The belly of what? The belly of a pregnant cow, a germinating seed of a still glowing ember, just waiting for the breath of inspiration. Beyond its pastoral and agrarian qualities, Imbolc is situated as a time of inspiration, the seeking and the sowing of it. It's never a bad time to clean up, to write a poem, to explore some new passion. But as we are on the precipice of bluer skies and brighter days, now is a wonderful time to follow your heart that you might follow through when the times allow. Of central veneration in Imbolc is the Pan-Celtic deity Bridget or Bridget or Bride in Scotland or Freyed in Wales, perhaps related to the post-Roman British Brigantia. All in all, a figure so well loved that she survived the Christianization of the British Isles in the form of Saint Bridget, the patron saint of Ireland. This is a deity and a saint highly associated with the qualities of the crafts of healing and poetry, but also blacksmithing and arguably war. A goddess of healing wells and the spark that ignites the flame of inspiration, kind of a dualistic tension in this one figure, the pagan and the Christian, the war and the peace, the fire and the water, the Gaelic and the bride. A god of healing wells and the spark that ignites the flame of inspiration. It's little wonder to me that so many pagan UU's laypeople and clergy find a resonance with this figure. Her name is also telling us that it might be less a name and more a title, translating to something like exalted one. And what could be more a source of exaltation to those of our ancestors who held the hemispheres of hard winter than the return of spring, the birth of the new, an eagerness to set the stage for celebration, to remind ourselves that the world turns still and all of us along with it. bride, Bridget, has many stories associated with her dependent upon location, but it's primarily in Scotland and Northern Ireland where we find a myth that reflects this seasonal shift most abundantly. Very little is known about the pre-Christian stories, especially of Old Scotland. The only name we really have for the people who come from here are from the conquering Romans, who called them the Picts, which is just a diminutive expression for little painted people. They left beautiful swirling carvings in stone, and while we cannot be certain, it seems likely that some threads of myth may survive through the ages in tales such as Bride or Bridget in her relationship to Bera, or the Cailleach, the goddess of winter. Her name the Cailleach translates to something like the veiled one or hooded woman, known by many as the old woman hag. That seems disrespectful. The Cailleach meaning has been associated with numerous mythological and folkloric figures in Ireland and Scotland, and also the Isle of Man, so all over the place. The origins of the Cailleach are as shrouded in mystery as the character herself is. Now, typically, she is portrayed as an elderly woman with a withered face. She is said to have a single piercing eye in the center of her forehead. This one-eyed aspect has become a defining feature of her character, symbolizing her ability to see beyond the ordinary and likening her with other such figures such as the Norse Nornir or the Greek Moirai, the goddesses of fates. Interesting connections. Could be something there. I am purely speculating here. However, that one-eyedness, you might think of Tolkien's Tower of Sauron in Lord of the Rings. This is a common trope in a lot of pre-Christian European mythology about struggle with something with a one eye. Just something you notice when you read a lot of mythology, friends. So before we move into our time of altar building, hear this retelling of the story of Bride and the Cailleach that comes from the northern parts of Scotland through the lens of poetry by author Christine Irving. Far away, long ago, in the folds behind Ben Nevis lived a queen who knew her land root to highest heaven. She tallied every pebble, quartz, agate, flint, nisus. She recognized each magpie, osprey, lark, raven. The towering stag came to her hand, calm as any sheep. Salmon leaped against her palm, bears nuzzled at her feet, babies gurgled in her presence, lying men blushed deep. Young mother's milk flowed faster, richer, more sweet. The Cailleach was her title, but her people called her hag. Again, disrespectful. She wore no crown, no jewels, no cloths of golden thread, bore a staff of elder wood, and wore a homespun rag, walked moor and field and crag and bog with silent barefoot tread. At home, her cauldron simmered slow upon a stony hearth where no one dared to stir the pot for fear of the evil eye. Healthy bairns tumbled soft against the hard-packed earth, but only daughters lived full span. Sons at this time were raised to die. The land demanded sacrifice to turn its seasons round. The Cailleach paid a heavy price, and kingly sons and proud brewed their limbs, cooked them. Maybe she deserved this title, actually. Poured it on the ground, walked the fields, strewed the bones, but never cried aloud. 10,000 generations passed as Cailleach kept the right. Wild oxen calved, the house dogs whelped. Each year produced a crop. One day she heard a baby's mew, faint with thirst and fright, found it naked, starved, and lone upon the mountaintop. Blonde babe as fair as she was, dark blue eyes to snapping black. Hag raised the girl child, bore her back to join the nursing brood. Of all the cubs that sucked her paps, Bridget showed most knack for following her mother's lead. Matching mood for mood, the Cailleach taught her secret paths and passes through the peaks, what places where the wild herbs grow and roe deer bend to drink. She darked the fairy skin with stain, dressed her in wool breeks, disguised the beauty of the girl, golden and cream. But Bridget's brother was not kin. He spied her at her bath, and passion broke a lifetime's bond in a single hour. He dared his mother's wrath, and long before noon, they fell in love. Foster daughter stole the cauldron, she stirred it as they fled, and fog rolled from the broth she spilled. Thick, drab, and shrouding mists, The Cailleach followed close at hand. Rage turned her black eyes red. She badgered them with sleet and lightning. Bride whistled up a binding curse that hardened her to stone, settled with her lover Angus, god of love, changed more to plough-tamed country. Without its queen, wild land grew dim, abandoned and alone. Without its blood, the earth grew bare, refusing its bounty. Nature needs its wilderness, barbaric, savage, bleak, unbroken woman, feral man, their wanton roaming child, unfurrowed prairie, standing grove, boisterous, rolling creek independent, never found housebroken or beguiled. So Bridget whistled backwards to release the stone-bound hag. Crone hissed at maid, she howled, they cried, moving toward reason, the substitute for blood, a heart of ox or stag. Maiden to rejoin crone in spring and summer season, we still call out the name when Imbolc draws near, to pull her from her lover's bed, out into the field, to charge the land with tenderness, revive what's cold and sere, call up green shoots, redden buds, bring us fruitful yield. Friends, will you join me in a moment of prayerful contemplation, that spirit of reverence that's available to all of us? And just join me in a moment of prayer for this world, so in need of love and the ministry that folks like you bring into the world. Will you join me? Spirit of life, love, and all good growing things, turner of spears, starter and ender of worlds, love deeper than deep, higher than high, suffusing and connecting everything. We come into a time where the world is surely hurting, and this is not new. And the intensities may be racking the heart. They may keep us from meeting love's demands, from building the power we are called to build, from moving it into the world as we are called to move it. May we be able to forgive ourselves and one another when we fall short of the demands of these times. May we find room to grieve the war raging across the land, trade wars, hot wars, all wars, for innocents always lie broken in their path. May we have the courage to rise up against hateful language, hateful ideas, and especially hateful actions as they manifest themselves and people find permission to move into the world in a way that would not meet love's demands. May we remember who we are and what we are called for in these times. Our hearts are with those who are grieving families lost in 2 tragic plane accidents in this country. All who are worried or who are actually being deported in this country. Our hearts are with them. May our labors also be with them and for them, and most certainly with them. We pray for the people in Canada who will be affected by tariffs, and we pray for the people here who will be affected by tariffs, and we pray for the people everywhere in this world who will be affected by the ruins this country might wreak upon the world. May we be better. May it start, if not some random place, at least with us and our hearts. So may it be. And so may, as we reflect on this day, the anticipation of spring's turn, may we remember that it's just like that a new day will dawn, but not on its own. The bow of history does not bend without pressure, without tension, without power, without struggle. May we be prepared to pull the bow, to arc the time, until we find a world and a way where we can really, truly create beloved community, where all may be welcome, regardless of who they are, what they've done, so long as we can rejoin the fold and love. So may it be. And friends, we have time for you to come and share if you would like to take a few moments. This is your time. I'm going to step aside for a few minutes, and if nothing else, we'll have some nice silence in such short supply these days. But if you would like to share and break that silence, you have permission. This is your time.
Good morning, Chris Peters. Pam already spoke about Friends United. I am preparing for our next trip coming up, leaving on February 14th, Valentine's Day, to the resort island of Roatan, which is not the purpose, but it's a nice bonus. Thank you, everyone, for all the donations, school supply donations already received. We will be accepting donations through Wednesday, February 12th, so we can pack and leave on the 14th. Thank you.
I wanted to thank all of you for the love and support you've shown me after Cindy's death. I think I'm finally reaching a place where I've accepted things and, I'm beginning to find acceptance and even comfort in the world about me. So thank you all again.
Well, I hear you, friend. Same. Here we are. Another poem, friends. This one titled Sun Song, a song that I long to hear. And I think we might get to hear today a little bit. Long winter claws the earth bare, scrape the bone and stone, fear upon the tree the root, one in its burrow wonders, will this be forever? Ignorant of our falling and coming return, the mother sun remembers and comes to rouse the hemisphere. It is the sad fact of shapes, the old oppression of orbits. Save this, all is turning, yearning to return, wanting yet ever breaking into a new dawn. Rays of sun song breach the ice as a grandmother's hands brush a tear, calling the first flowers of the year and the deer antler and the trout swim and the child back into the yard. You who scratch at the dark, chipping away an epitaph into the old, come, behold the new thing we are all becoming, hands in the dirt to the heart, as a planet turning, as a prayer ever burning. In the version of the story of Bride and the Cailleach we just heard, and in yet other tellings, we find the figure of Bride and the Cailleach deeply interrelated, woven together inextricably in the steady beat of seasons. In some instances of the story, rather than being turned to stone with a whistle curse, the Cailleach goes to the well of youth to, on her own accord, become bride again, a personification of hard winter and soft returning spring. But it's all one world, and it's all one season. You might even consider that the saint and the goddess themselves are possibly one figure, not two. And yet I find that a lot of us sometimes feel as if we are broken up inside, as if we have to be just one thing. And as we're exploring inclusion this month, I think it's worthy to consider the ways in which we feel broken up inside, trying to force ourselves to just be one thing. But we could just be a kaleidoscopic versions of ourselves. We will be different people here and there. So there is something to this myth beyond the agrarian and pastoral and cyclical seasonal myths I think there's something about integrating ourselves, right? Especially that which we find to be distasteful. You know, nature needs its wilderness. Barbaric, savage, bleak, unbroken woman, feral man, their wanton roaming child, unfurrowed prairie, standing grove, boisterous rolling creek, independent, never found housebroken or beguiled. Indeed, we need wild places in our hearts, outside, for both humanitarian and ecological purposes. I was meeting with a longtime member of the church recently, speaking about his Chris Albert, about his plans to put some native buffalo grass on his property, and lightly bemoaning the city ordinances that prohibit the growth of head-height wild grass, because at one time, that was what grass was like out here, very, very tall. Now, there are reasonable justifications for such a policy. I think, you know, tall grass hides a lot of stuff that we maybe don't want to get bit by. I understand. But one can't help but wonder of the lives of the original people of this land who regularly navigated the wild, tall native grasses. Something seems, to me at least, to have been lost along the way. Native wild grasses, they're incredibly resilient once settled, launching roots over the years, some 30 feet deep, and like the Kaliak and the bride, fall into a cycle of growth and die over, leaving a layer of new soil and capturing carbon in the process. It is so tremendously easy to take something like grass for granted, but the magic is all around us. The means of change so tantalizingly close. And while we have reason to mow our lawns, if you want, perhaps we could do to reorient our relationship to the practice of our regimenting the more than human world and also our own hearts. Often we speak of order and chaos, of wilderness and wildness, as a moral juxtaposition, aligning ourselves to the right side of structure, right? This has given us many things: television, traffic laws, modern medicine, machine guns. It's allowed us to make stones talk to each other via, goodness, radio waves and stuff, right? For all intents and purposes, invisible light, a form of electromagnetism. I fear it has also winnowed our relationship to the planet as a whole, curtailed our appreciation for wild things, both without and tragically within. Now, this month we speak of inclusion, the latter letter in that now most infamous heresy of DEI. A heresy we proudly practice here at Second Unitarian Church of Omaha, not as a means to curtail or circumvent merit, but as an honest recognition that our differences are holy and we grow best together when we can learn more of and from one another. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are not a be-all, end-all. They are guideposts to the promised land where all people might find common kinship across lines of identifiable and immutable differences. Now, of course, there's a metaphor for grass here and why we mow our lawns, perhaps the Kaliak with being the wild force and the bride being the tame force, but both of these are necessary. And they're also just constructions. You know, all models, sometimes models are useful, but none of them are perfect or perfectly true. But I do find that we do tend to align ourselves with rigidity and order as a means of comfort and preservation of our own little box of life. And this won't do in the world that is being built around us, a world that would super regiment things like, well, everything. It's authoritarian, stricture, down to the letter of the law. It erases people because it draws clear boundaries around what is allowed in the human life, inevitably cutting us off from important parts of ourselves, from the wild parts of ourselves, and we cannot be human without this. These wild parts aren't necessarily dangerous or bad or anything. Honestly, it's just constructed as an other. What is not you? What is not like you? Who might have a different experience? Someone who speaks a different language, comes from a different country, looks differently, identifies differently, loves differently. So it is. And these are often constructed as an other, to either assimilate or destroy or to tame, and no, says I. There is a place for order and structure in our world. Maybe you don't want snakes in your grass. I can respect that. I like traffic laws. I like being able to use the internet. All of these emerge from some kind of structure, some kind of regimenting of the world around us, nature and societies. And so this is important. But it is also important that we do not cut off our nose to spite our face and pretend that the wild parts of the world, and especially the parts of ourselves that are hard to love sometimes, are not part of who we are. Imbolc, in the story of Cailleach and the bride, might call us to think of what are we keeping locked away inside of ourselves. As the Cailleach leaves bride locked up in a tower, or a cave, as it were, in the Scottish version of the myth, what are we keeping locked up inside of us? Our grief, our anger, our frustrations, our worry, fear? All real and all worthy to be named as parts of you, not something we have to hide, but something we have to be mindful of, right? We don't want to be loosening the bounds upon all things, but neither do we need to keep ourselves so orderly and boxed in we forget how to be human. I've said it here before, friends. We don't have hard final answers on what happens after you die here. I don't know the name or the face or what book God wants you to read, but if there's a purpose for us to be here, friends, critically, especially in times like this, it is to remember how to stay human, how to covenant with one another, how to build bridges across divisions, how to build beloved community that we are running so far away from a dominant cultural perspective. It's important that we retain those skills of connection here, because they might be winnowed away from us as we over-regiment our world and we forget the soft, squishy, hard parts of being human. So it is. This is your charge. Amongst other things, at least this. Stay human. Stay turning. Stay growing and becoming. Keep the wild parts of your life alive. Heck, if you have room, keep some wild parts of your life alive in your yard somewhere. But you know your property better than I do. Friends, this trend towards pushing away DEI, what is it? Well, we practice this because we know our knowledge is limited and we value different perspectives. DEI is not the end-all be-all thing. It's not a miracle cure. It is a mechanism to counter our biases. Biases do not make you wicked or bad. Biases are interwoven into this world. Implicit biases are part of life, and if we fear them within us, run away from them, pretend that that can't be me at all, well then that is the same as having an infection and not going to the doctor, not seeking some kind of treatment. This is just a way that we can grow together as a community and beyond these walls. So when you hear this term being maligned, pushed around as though it's some kind of massive bureaucratic burden upon people, consider that some people are just really scared to look inside themselves. That's not you though, friends. I don't think. That's not you. And if it is, that's okay, we can talk about that. It can be scary to do the inner work, to reckon with the parts of us that are challenging. We all have them. I definitely have them. You very likely have them, and that is okay, friends. But on this day of Imbolc, as we anticipate the spring coming, might we also anticipate the new thing coming to life within us and in this world and who we are called to be? Who will you be in these times, friends? I cannot tell you that, but I hope that you will at least stay kind and stay loving. And remember, humanity is not your enemy. Not across lines of difference, not even across lines of politic. Humanity is not your enemy. The war machine might be an enemy, the thing that grinds people up and hurts people for its own power, who gambles away our freedom to claim its own authority, but not humanity and not your neighbor, and certainly, most certainly, not yourself. A new thing is being born, friends, and you are part of that. We are all part of that, all of us, a part of it.